All I know is that Shane Warne was an exceptional bowler, but I had the good fortune to also get to know him as a human being, and I think that he was a very good human being. Flawed, no doubt about it, but a good human being.
Chappelli, thanks for talking to us. It's been a tough 24 hours, hasn't it?
It's been horrible. I just wrote saying, can I please at least get the grieving for Rodney out of the way? Now I'm grieving for two people. It's bloody awful.
Oh, the world is shocked, hasn't it? Shane Warne's demise at 52 is something that it'll take some time. It's still a numbing feeling for us so far from the world. What's the sense like from an Australian, from someone who has followed his career from the start, from someone who he considered and often publicly said was almost a spiritual mentor? That's what Shane Warne looked up to you as. What's the immediate feeling?
Well, it's obviously the shock. When someone dies at 52, it can't be anything else but a shock. As time goes on, you start to think about some of the things that you saw and you heard about, but I never for a moment, same as I never thought, when I saw him, I thought this guy can bowl, but I never thought 700 test wickets. And I never thought 52. I was probably thinking, mate, if you get to 70, you'll be doing pretty well. 52 never even entered my head.
If I could then just take you down, all those years back, memory lane, first impressions of Shane, first time you saw him bowl?
Well, I go back even a little bit before that, because I knew Terry Jenner very well, because obviously I played against him when he played for the West, but had a lot of cricket with him for both South Australia and Australia. But I remember writing that he's a very good communicator. He's got good knowledge. He's a good communicator. He'll make a very good coach if someone gives him the chance. Well, the important thing is that he got the chance with Shane Warne. And Warne he chose very well there, because TJ gave him some tough love, but he understood the art and he loved the art. Then suddenly he's in the test team for Sydney and he gets 1 for 150. Ravi Shastri belts him. Ravi gets 200, plays him very well. And TJ was there. And TJ was really keen, and he came up to me and said, what do you think of Shane Warne? And I said, mate, don't be fooled by those ugly figures. He can bowl. Never for a moment did I think 700, not even 500. Maybe a couple of hundred test wickets, be very good. But I said, this fella can bowl. Then I wasn't surprised when he did what he did in Sri Lanka, and he started to get better. But then when you started to get ball of the century and one bloke, Rodney Hogg, former test fast bowler, wrote for the Melbourne Truth. He said, this guy will take 500 test wickets. This is before he's played for Australia. And the fella, the editor sacked him. He said, you're an idiot. No one takes 500 test wickets, and sacked him. Well, I guess the editor would turn around now and say, well, I was right. He didn't claim 500, he claimed 700. But you could see, even in those early days, the bloke could bowl.
Do you remember the first conversation you had with him, or one that stands out?
And this is Warnie. Warnie was a very generous bloke, very generous. And he was, I think, sometimes too generous in the praise that he gave people who he thought helped him. Well, I remember telling him, and I said to him, Shane, the more that you know about yourself, the better off you'll be. And I'm talking not just cricket, I'm talking life. And I've seen Warnie in print say, at first I didn't understand what he was talking about. But I went away and I thought about it. And when I realized what he was talking about, he said, this is the most important thing for me. And that tells you a lot about Shane Warne. See, you can give somebody some information, but it's what they do with that information. And Warnie was smart enough to go away and to work it out.
You also wrote very highly of him, his leadership. One of the great regrets that he never captained Australia on a full-time basis yet. You wrote highly of him. You said he made it exciting for the players, and that turned out to be exciting for the game. Did you notice these similarities throughout? What were those sort of conversations like when you spoke cricket?
Well, I guess I used my experience with Dennis Lillee when I was talking about Shane Warne, because to me, they were similar in a lot of things. And the similarity was with the fans. You know, whenever you gave the ball to Dennis Lilly, you as a captain thought, that's good, I'm giving it to Lilly, something's going to happen here. But you got the feeling that the fans, whether they be in the ground or whether they be watching on television, they edged forward in their seat and thought something's going to happen here. And so they got more excited about the game. And I felt exactly the same way about Shane Warne. Every time the captain gave the ball to Shane Warne, the people either put down their beer if they were, somewhere, or they're at the ground, sit forward in their seat, sit forward watching television because something's going to happen here. And that's the way I felt about Shane Warne. He was an aggressive cricketer. You only have to talk to him a little bit. You listen to him talk about the game of cricket, and it was all aggression. And that's what I liked in a cricketer. That's what Rodney liked in a cricketer. That's the great thing about Dennis, and that was the great thing about Warney, that they thought about how do I get a wicket, not how do I stop the opposition scoring, how do I get a wicket.
So at what point did you think he's become a great bowler?
When I saw him produce that first delivery to get rid of Gatting, you start to think, this might be a bit more than 200. And then obviously I saw him throughout the 93 series. And I forget now, I think he got 30 odd wickets in that series. He got a lot anyhow. And I'm probably now starting to think, well, this is 300 odd.
Yet we ended up with more than twice as many. So how much of Warney was skill and how much of it was mind for you?
Yeah, well, here's an example. Tony Greig, who I did a lot of commentary with, and Tony Greig he always took the opposite side to Australia. Whoever Australia are playing, he'd take the other side. But South Africa was obviously very close to him because he played provincial cricket in South Africa. So Daryl Cullinan, he had a bit of an affinity with Daryl Cullinan. And Cullinan couldn't play Warne's flipper for love nor money. So Greggy gets him before a game one day. Now, bear in mind, Daryl Cullinan, by this stage, you're earning quite good money for you're playing for your living. So if you're number 4 batsman, you're supposed to be a very good batsman and you're playing for your living. Tony Greig goes to him and he says, what are you looking for with Shane Warne's flipper? The answer he got from Daryl Cullinan, ridiculous. Daryl Cullinan said, I don't know. Now, how can you be number 4 and earning your living from batting and you don't know? But Warney was smart enough. He probably saw that and thought, I'm way in front of this bloke. And, he would talk up the flipper. And if I had just a quiet private chat with Warney, I'd say, mate, the flipper's a ball. It gets 9-10 jack out. Shouldn't get batsmen out. And Warney would say, yeah, I know that, but don't tell them. And, he'd bluff the world. So he could bowl. Boy, he could bowl. But he also had a very good brain, and you had to be a smart batsman if you wanted to keep up with him.
He often felt that he belonged to your era. Would he have been as successful or more successful then?
A few years ago, I got this phone call from a radio station, and I don't know what they were talking about, but we get on to Shane Warne. And they said, oh, mate, you had a good team. How would you have gone with Shane Warne in your team? And I said, I'll tell you one thing, mate. We would have picked him because he's one of the champions in this game. And if you can't find a spot for a leg spinner who bowls the opposition out, you're foolish. Warney, don't worry. Warney would have got in our team and he would have been a big part of our team.
From what I gathered when the news broke, this seemed to really hit, not just because it was shocking, it seemed to be almost personal for cricket fans around the world. People who wrote about the game, saw the game. In spite of all the many flaws, if you'd like to call it, off-field issues, controversies that his life was marred with, it seemed like there was still the sense of endearment. People still loved Warney in spite of all those fairly high-profile controversies in his life. Why do you think that was?
Well, Ron, I'd put people in 2 categories. There's people like me. Sure, I'm a commentator, but how do I think about the game? I think about the game as an ex-player. And if I see Shane Warne bowling, I'm thinking now, how would I try and play this to be a bit better than the rest? Then you've got the average fan. And to the average fan, Warney, I think, is They see this exceptional talent as a cricketer on the field. Then they read about the other stuff. And a lot of them will say, oh, well, if I'd had half a chance, I'd have done that too. But you see here, and this is another thing about Shane Warne, I found him to be very, very honest bloke. And you remember he got into, there was some thing about an affair he had or whatever. And Warney came out and he said, I think he might have got suspended or something. And he said, all I've got to do is explain to my wife. I've got to convince my wife. I've got to get an apology from my wife. Nobody else. It's nobody else's problem. It's my wife's problem. And I thought to myself, that's pretty smart, actually, because it doesn't matter what I think or what Cricket Australia thinks. It matters what Simone thought. You'll probably find today that Simone is very, very sad, because I think even though they'd split, there was still, that relationship still meant something. But these other people that you're talking about, they see Warney as somebody that they've got up there because he had cricket ability, but okay, he was flawed. But aren't most people flawed? And if you really scrape down below the surface, there's quite a bit of flawing there. It's just that Warnies were made more public because of who he was, but also because he was prepared to admit to those flaws. Whereas probably a lot of other people don't get the opportunity, or they won't admit to those flaws. But Warney, I think the important thing with Warney was he may not have been, I think he probably was widely loved, but he was certainly widely respected. And I think that's the important thing, that people knew about the flaws, knew about his cricketing ability, and said, I still admire this guy.
Do you have a favourite Warne moment, if you haven't covered it already?
I remember thinking, I forget where we were. We must have been at a cricket ground somewhere, and I think we were going out or whatever. But there was a lineup of people who wanted Shane Warne's autograph. And he just said, any that weren't in the line, he said, get in the line and I'll sign the whole lot. And I'm thinking, geez, Warney, come on, mate, we need to get going. And there was a big line there. And not only did he sign every autograph for that, he went right down the list, but he would chat to virtually each guy. And he wouldn't be, hi, Ronick, as he signed, hi, Ronick, how are you? He'd start talking to you, what are you doing at school? How's your cricket going? What do you do? Do you bat? Do you bowl? This is the sort of conversation he's having with all these people. Not a meaningless conversation. You can see the kid would have walked away and gone to his dad and said, oh, mate, I've just got, not only did I get an autograph from Shane Warne, but he asked me what I was doing at school. He asked me how I was batting, and to me, that shows you something about the bloke. He's not just a cricketer. He's a full human being, or he was, sadly.
How do you think cricket will remember him, Chappelli?
I think cricket will remember him very fondly. All I know is that Shane Warne was an exceptional bowler, but I had the good fortune to also get to know him as a human being. And I think that he was a very good human being. Flawed, no doubt about it, but a good human being. And I think in the end, you realise that I've got a whole life to go through. Some of that life will be as a sportsman, in my case, Warney's case, cricketer, but I've still got this full life to lead. And I've got to lead a decent life, so that people might say, oh, he was a bit of a flawed character, but he was a pretty decent bloke. If they say that, I think you've done all right. And Shane Warne was a decent bloke.